Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Boundary. My name's Josh. I have my partner Nick back this week. Nick, have you recovered?
I'm getting there, Josh.
Getting there. Good to hear, mate. Good to have you back. We got a massive show for you this week. We're going to be talking about West Coast and what they should be doing with their injured players. Mitch Clark at Melbourne. Where's his career at the moment? We'll be talking about the Gold Coast win over Collingwood, arguably their best win of their short history. The Toast and Roast is back, and we'll give you a short run on Adam Tomlinson, who was the NAB Rising Star this week. Nick, how'd you go in your tipping last week, mate?
I think I got six last week, so I've actually dropped one in the tipping leaderboard. Bit disappointed with that, but hopefully I can bounce back this week. How about yourself?
Yeah, I was a bit the same. I went for a few outsiders again to try and get a bit of a lead, and I cuffed up top spot. So I led by three at one point during the year. Tried to get a few ahead, and unfortunately lost my spot at the top of the ladder. But that's the way it works, and I got to try and get back up there to win that massive cash prize at the end of the year. So moving on, Nick, what surprised you in round 17?
I think what surprised me and what surprised everyone, I guess, was the Gold Coast Suns. I watched the game from start to finish. It was absolutely brilliant performance from them. Contested possessions and the pressure on Collingwood all the way through the game.
Yeah, I have to agree, mate. It's hard to go past the Suns. They were very, very good. They're not just a Gary Ablett side. We'll go into it a bit later. But they're not just a one man team anymore. There's so many young kids coming through now that are starting to play some really good footy. So
I think from a
yeah,
Collingwood point of view, though, what surprised us might have been Gary Ablett because they didn't put a tag on him. But
yeah,
as you said, we'll get on that later.
I'm very surprised. At least after at least 30 possessions that Nathan Buckley and the coaching staff didn't throw someone on him. But as you said, we'll go into a bit more detail later on, and we'll push on as we talk about the West Coast Eagles. So the West Coast Eagles, Nick, they've kind of put the Q in the rack, maybe. Not too sure. They've left a huge number of outs this week. They've left out Nick Nat Nui with a bit of soreness, which has been rumoured to be osteitis pubis, which isn't great for the big man. Mark Lacroix with a foot, Darren Glass with soreness, Luke Shuey with a hamstring, and Adam Selwood, who's been dropped surprisingly. So they've left out a few senior names there.
If they haven't put the Q in the rack, do you think it's time they did, Josh?
It's a tough call. They're only two games outside the eight, and they've got to run home of the Western Bulldogs this week, the Gold Coast Suns in Patterson Stadium. Then they've got three tough games, but probable games that they can win. Essendon at Etihad Stadium, Geelong at Patterson Stadium, and Collingwood at the MCG, and finish off with Adelaide at Patterson Stadium. So it's still doable, but I just feel that the the injuries are taking too much of a toll on this side. Nat Nui's clearly, as we've seen, is playing under an injury cloud, losing the likes of Glass, Lacroix, as I mentioned, Shuey as well. Through injury, it's a massive task for the West Coast Eagles, the rest of the senior players and the younger players that have come into the side to lift the lift the side to the ability of what the players that they have lost. If that makes any sense, of course.
There certainly are some
um,
big outs this week, and it'd be a massive ask for them to get up, two games out of the eight with some quality opposition vying for that eighth spot. But it's sort of the time of the season when they really need to make that call. Nat Nui, as you mentioned, injury cloud over him, and quite a few other senior players. Do they rest these players now, put them in for early surgery, or do they have a real go to get to September?
well, I know they've already put Bo Waters in for surgery this season already for his shoulder. That's an aim for him to try and get ready for the 2014 pre-season. But the names they've brought in are quite capable of filling that role. Blaine Wilson, Ashton Ham, Sam Butler, Scott Lysette, Scott Selwood, Matt Rosa, and Brad Shepard have all played some very good senior football already in their short to long careers. So I think they're capable of playing some good footy and still making the finals. It's just going to be a massive task week in, week out, especially with that three-game stretch with Essendon, Geelong, Collingwood. They're going to need to win at least three, you would think, if they're any chance of winning the finals. Now, Melbourne's Mitch Clark has hit a bit of a speed bump in his career, Nick. He's got a bit of a problem with his foot. It's called the fracture. Similar injury to what Trent Crode had as a Hawthorn player. It effectively ended his career. Now, Clark's only played the 15 games in the 2 years that he's been at the Demons. He's a vital player to the Demons. He kicked 27 goals in those first few games that he played at the Demons. So he made the right move. He looked comfortable in that forward line. He's a massive loss at the moment for the Demons.
Yeah, he certainly is. It'd be a massive partnership for the Demons, with him alongside Chris Dawes and an informed Jack Watts, and the Demons fans will certainly be hoping he can get back to full fitness because he's a vital part of the Melbourne rebuild moving forward.
Absolutely, and you can throw Jesse Hogan in there as well, who joins them in 2014, and he's very important to that side and where they're heading. You can just see by his tweet that he sent out the other night how disappointed he is to be sitting on the sidelines and not be out with those young kids. That tweet read, "Shattered to miss the rest of the season. I'm focused on getting better for 2014 and beyond. Thanks for all your support, guys. Hashtag bring on 2014." That's a great attitude to have. He's obviously hurting that he's not out on the field and helping these young kids develop. But he's got to get himself right, and he's made the call 6 weeks out that he's not going to get back this season. But yeah, he's so important to that side that he needs to get himself right for round one of next year. Moving on to what was a magnificent win for the Gold Coast Suns on Saturday against arguably their biggest opponent in Collingwood. They got the win. It was their biggest win in their history. It was a great win, wasn't it, Nick?
Yeah, it certainly was. I watched the game from start to finish, and I really enjoyed it. Gold Coast, not many people actually tipped the upset here, I don't think. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, no tag on Gary Ablett, and he just ran right.
He certainly did, and it's the Gold Coast Suns are just not Gary Ablett anymore. There's so many young kids starting to come through and show their potential. I'll just reel off a couple of names here for you: Trent McKenzie, Jaeger O'Meara, Harley Bennell, Matt Shaw, Dion Prestia, Luke Russell, Tom Nichols, Rory Thompson, all having fantastic years, and this side is going to be really good in the next couple of years. We actually got a question during the week through our Facebook page asking, "Do you believe that the Suns can reach their 20,000 member mark and win a premiership in the next 3 years?" I don't know about you, Nick, but at the start of the year, I would have said no chance in hell. But seeing their season so far, you have to kind of rethink, don't you?
Yeah, you certainly do. Next season, I think they're a sure bet. To if not make the finals, they'll be one of those ninth or 10th teams that are there right to the very end, pushing hard for that last spot in the finals. They've been very impressive this season, and up until a couple of weeks ago, they were still right in the race this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can't talk about the Gold Coast Suns without talking about that special little man named Gary Ablett. He's an absolute phenomenon, and we're witnessing greatness at the moment. There's no doubt that at the end of his career, we're going to be talking about Gary Ablett Jr. as one of the top three, top five, maybe even top one players to have ever played the game.
Every so often, the discussion kind of creeps back up again. Is he the best player in the game? Is Pendlebury catching up? But he pulls out a performance like this, and it just shuts up his doubters. It was just brilliant. And I noticed a couple of the betting markets have actually closed up markets on who's going to win. They're going who's going to come second because they reckon Gary Ablett's just got it sewn up this early in the season, and I'd agree with them there because he's just been amazing all year.
Now, moving on now to our new favourite segment, the Toast and Roast. Nick, I'll let you fire off. What do you got for us, mate?
Well, I couldn't actually find a toast this week. I was thinking Gary Ablett, but it's just been a while talking about him, so I'm going to do a double roast this week. First cab off the rank is Bruce McAvaney saying "wowie" after who was it? Kerno kicked a goal in the first term on Friday night. BT does that enough. We don't need you encouraging him. I'm sick and tired of BT, and as little encouragement as he can get, the better, I think.
Yeah, I have to agree on that. Yeah, it's starting to get a bit tedious.
My second roast this week, a bit more serious note. Zach Tui Jack Zeeble went down with a shin injury and was on the sideline for about 10 minutes, getting it strapped and getting it looked at. And the moment Jack Zeeble came back on the ground, Zach Tui went over to him and he sort of looked down at his shin and then he gave him a bit of kick in the shin and sort of had a bit of a joke about it. And I know most people have a look at that and think it's just a bit of banter between a couple of players, but I think it was a bit low. He'd been on the boundary for quite a while and just unnecessary. Don't need that in the game.
Yeah, good call there, mate. I have to agree.
How about yourself?
My toast this week goes to the 95,000 people at the MCG on Wednesday night. I'm a massive EPL fan, if people didn't know. I'm a Manchester United fan. Unfortunately, didn't get up to Sydney to see them. And being a Man U fan, Liverpool's not my favourite team in the world. But hearing 95,000 fans singing "You'll Never Walk Alone,"
It was just brilliant, wasn't it?
oh mate, it's sent chills down your spine. It was fantastic to hear. Great to see one of the all-time greats of the game, Steven Gerrard, down here as well. It was just an awesome rendition, and as the commentator said, they were left speechless after that rendition of "You'll Never Walk Alone," and it was just fantastic to listen to it. I wish I had been there, but unfortunately had prior commitments.
Even from a neutral point of view, and even people who don't like football or soccer as they call it in Australia, you've just got to appreciate how amazing that moment is.
Absolutely. Now moving on to my roast. My roast is going to not the Australian cricket team, but the critics of the Australian cricket team, and there's plenty of them out there. So many people expect for the next Matthew Hayden, Ricky Ponting, Adam Gilchrist, Justin Langer, Damien Martin, Shane Warne, Glenn McGrath, the next one of them to come along. Those players that I just reeled off there are generally once in a lifetime type of players. We're never going to see that type of player ever again. And if we're going to have to develop these young kids coming in. The likes of Pattinson, the likes of Agar. We've got to give the likes of Smith, Kawaja, and Hughes a go. People are just going to accept that we're not the best in the world anymore. Now that I've had that spiel, it's time to move on to the NAB Rising Star, Adam Tomlinson from the GWS Giants. Nick, you've got his stats for the weekend?
Yeah, on the weekend he had 23 disposals, 8 contested possessions at 73.9% efficiency, 9 marks, 4 tackles and a goal from 88% time on ground. So a great performance from the youngster on the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to watch him firsthand last week. He's playing against the Bombers, and a good friend, Anthony, he made me aware that Tomlinson does a lot of work that people don't see. He creates space behind him for young gun Jeremy Cameron to run into, and he also has an impact himself, and we saw that against Essendon last week, and he had a terrific game, and he's modelling himself on St Kilda captain Nick Riewoldt, who's known for his gut running and his courage. I'll get that word out eventually. Courage and his gut running. So he's modelling himself on Riewoldt and wants to become that type of player, and he certainly made inroads on Saturday afternoon against the Bombers by doing that. Moving on to the games now, and we're going to obviously start with a massive game tonight. Essendon versus Hawthorn at Etihad Stadium. It's second v first. The Bombers have brought in David Zaharakis, Tate Pearce, Heath Hopkins, Ben Howlett, and father-son recruit Joe Danaher. And out goes Nathan Lovett-Murray, Jackson Merritt, Nick O'Brien, who are all been omitted, Dustin Fletcher with a back injury, and Stuart Cramery with an ankle.
And for the Hawks, Lance Franklin and Sam Mitchell come back into the side, if you don't mind, and Kyle Chaney and Will Langford have been omitted.
Nick, I cannot wait for this game. I'm really on edge. I know it's unusual for an Essendon man to say, but I do have a soft spot for the Hawks. I've always said I'd be a Hawk if I wasn't a Bomber. So I'm really looking forward to this contest tomorrow night. We're going to spend a bit more time on this game as it is such a massive game. So many matchups, so intriguing all over the ground. Obviously, the inclusion of Lance Franklin and Sam Mitchell are huge for Hawthorn, and Zaharakis, Hocking and Howlett for the Bombers are just as important as the Bombers probably lacked a little bit of midfield depth last week against the Giants.
It's interesting you should say that, Josh, about you'd be a Hawk if you weren't a Bomber, because these teams hate each other.
Yeah, we certainly do. There's no secret that these two sides hate each other. And you look back at 2009 when Lloyd lined up Brad Sewell, 2004 line in the sand, 1985, 1984, 1983 grand finals. The rivalry just continues to grow, and it's fascinating to watch. And I honestly cannot remember the last time that Essendon and Hawthorn faced off against each other as the second and first sides in the competition. Um, we
We
might
should,
run through a couple of the matchups at the moment, Nick. There's a few good ones across the ground. Jake Carlisle, I think he's best suited for Lance Franklin in the Essendon defence. What are your thoughts?
yeah, we've spoken a lot in recent weeks, and you certainly have a strong opinion on it. Which end of the ground Carlisle should play, but this week definitely down back for him and on Lance Franklin. Michael Hurley, interestingly, has been named at full forward this week, so seems like that's the way they'll line up this weekend.
Yeah, with Stuart Cramery going down, I think Hurley will play down forward. As soon as I saw the ins and Danaher was in, I hadn't seen the outs, and as soon as I saw Danaher in, I thought, oh, Hurley's going to be in defence, but then I saw Cramery was out. Some other ones, we got Kyle Hooker, who's been severely underrated this season. He'll most likely go to the in and Jared Ruffhead, I would think. Courtney Dempsey will probably most likely go to Cyril Rioli. Tate Pears has come in, I think, to play specifically on Hawthorn for Jack Gunston, who flies under the radar a little bit. So, looking at it on paper, I know it's a very different story when it comes to game day, but on paper, the Bombers probably match up pretty well against the Hawks forwards.
Yeah,
It's
there's a lot spoken about, Franklin and Roughhead, that massive strike force, and David Hale obviously always chips in with quite a few, but they've got those gun small forwards who can really hurt, the Gunstons, the Bruce, the Rioli. I know as a Cats fan, we've got a good history of keeping the big ones quiet, but it's always those small guys who hurt us.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think where Hawthorn's going to get on top of Essendon is in the midfield, just without Joe Watson there, adding that bit of grunt. I've said all season that the Bombers are probably just one player short in the midfield that has a bit of grunt of a complete list. And unfortunately, losing Joe Watson, you're now two players down. So,
I saw you mention on Twitter during the week, they're really missing one contested ball winner. That's the one big gap in the side.
yeah, absolutely. And I still stand by that thought. And I think Hawthorn, if they're going to win this game, it's going to be in that area with the likes of Hodge, Lewis, who else we got there? Sam Mitchell, Brad Sewell, Jonathan Simpkin goes in there as well. So um, if Essendon are going to win, they're going to have to stop that midfield, I feel. So
And Brendan Goddard's been named on the wing this week. He's definitely someone who comes into that category. He's got to win the hardball this week and really become a presence for the Essendon midfield.
absolutely, and he's had a terrific year this year. He's crossed over since Kilda, used the ball effectively well, which is what Essendon probably struggled with in the last couple of years. And the real big problem that Essendon has had this year is their entry into the forward 50. Essendon has the most inside 50s in the comp, yet aren't able to capitalise on goals. I think they're sitting 10th in the competition for marks inside 50. So that just shows that the ball's not being delivered into the forward 50 at a good rate. Joe Danaher coming into the side, the key to him is you got to let him run and jump at the ball. He's not going to get outmarked because he takes the ball at the highest point uh, of the mark of the ball. I was really impressed with Corey Delalio and Travis Collier last week against the Giants. Two young guys came in, took their opportunity. Uh, I cannot say much more about this game, mate, because it's an absolute ripper on our hands.
Certainly is. Who are you tipping this week?
I'd love to tip the Bombers, but I've got to tip with my head, not my heart. I think Hawthorn will just be a bit too strong. I think by about 27 points. Anything over 5 goals, I'd probably be disappointed with. But yeah, I'm hoping for a good contest. I know it will be. when two good sides come up against each other, they bring the best out of each other. So I'm really looking forward to it, mate. Who are you tipping?
Well, as a Cats fan, these are the two teams above me on the ladder, and not too happy about that. But I think Hawthorn will just be too strong. The likes of Franklin and Mitchell coming back in. I'm going to say Hawthorn by 22 points.
Now we move on to the Saturday games. It's the Gold Coast Suns versus Carlton. The Suns got the better of them last time we met up at the Metricon Stadium. The ins for the Gold Coast Suns, just the one change. In comes Charlie Dixon, and out goes Josh Hall, who's been omitted.
And for the Blues, Mitch Robertson and Josh Bootsma come in. Andrew McGuinness with a groin injury comes out, and Jared Keisha has been omitted.
Interesting game this, Nick, isn't it? It has a very 50-50 feel about it.
Yeah,
Which Carlton side is going to turn up?
Yeah, it certainly does. Carlton have been really up and down the last couple of weeks, obviously winning by a point over North Melbourne. And the Suns, obviously, with that massive, massive win over the Pies last weekend, they'll be very happy with that and hoping to back it up against more quality opposition this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And you probably think that Carazzo would go straight to Gary Ablett. Carazzo was touted as the best tagger only 12 months ago before he did that shoulder injury against the Bombers. Mick Malthouse said only yesterday that he's not just planning for Gary Ablett, he's planning for the whole Gold Coast side. And as we said before, it's not just Gary Ablett, and it is the younger players that are starting to come through. You throw in Charlie Dixon, who's come in this week, who's had a terrific season for the games he's played. He's missed a couple through injury, but for Charlie Dixon to come back in, give that forward line a bit of strength as well. You wanted to touch on Matthew Cruiser, Nick?
Yeah, Cruiser's been great in recent weeks. Really stepping up and really starting to show he can be one of the best ruckmen in the competition. It's always one of the most important cogs in your side to have that great tap ruckman who can get the ball in your midfielder's hands first, obviously, and he's really filling that role well.
Absolutely, and he can go forward as well, which is crucial for a ruckman these days as well. Who are you tipping, mate?
I'm gonna tip the Blues, but not with too much confidence. They missed quite a few chances to close out the game with North Melbourne last week, but I think they probably won't take Gold Coast as lightly as Collingwood did last week. So I'm going to go Carlton by 10 points.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether the Gold Coast Suns will be encouraged by last week and take some real momentum into this game against the Blues, or will they come back down to earth and play a really flat game? That's what you get with these young sides, and I'm not really sure on which Gold Coast side will turn up or which Carlton side will turn up. So I think I'm going to tip Carlton just by 4 points, but as you said, Nick, not with too much confidence. The next game is Melbourne versus North Melbourne at Etihad Stadium. The Melbourne ins, in comes Cameron Pedersen, out goes Colin Garland, who's having a terrific year with an ankle injury. Nick, you got North Melbourne ins?
Yeah, and for the Kangaroos, Cameron Delaney comes in and Scott McMahon comes out omitted.
It's an interesting game, this one. North Melbourne fell short again last week by 1 point to the Blues. This time they came from behind. The Demons, we know how their season's gone, and we don't have to go into too much detail about that. Nick, you got your thoughts on North Melbourne?
Yeah, one positive for North Melbourne last week, Lindsay Thomas, he was so dangerous. He crumbs, swings onto the left, and he can really provide a great crumbing target, great crumbing option for North Melbourne. Get some goals on the board, and Carlton almost looked like they had that game closed out last week, and North Melbourne, showed that shin bone of spirit and came back hard, but fell just short. And they're outside that group of teams on 28 points, so I think their season now finally, after all that, is over and done. So probably time for a youth policy.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's worth giving games to young Mad Jack Dore, not so young, but Mad Jack Dore. It's been quite evident that ruckman Todd Goldstein is evidently tired. He's shouldered the majority of the ruck work all year. For the Demons, they keep rotating their youngsters on and off each week. Young Jack Fitzpatrick, he kicked 4 goals in Darwin last week and was really good. He's starting to become a cult figure down at the Demons. If they continue getting games and then into these young guys, they're going to be better for the run. And It's it's obvious that they're rebuilding and they've just got to keep overturning their list and giving the young players a go, which is great to see.
Who are you tipping this week, Josh?
I think North Melbourne will do this one comfortably. They'll be that furious after losing another game so with a low margin last week. I'll get it out eventually, guys. I'm getting there. Uh, I think, yeah, North Melbourne just too strong. I'm tipping them by about 74 points.
Yeah, and especially at Etihad, even though it's a Melbourne home game, it's at Etihad Stadium this week. Yeah, North Melbourne just too good. Even though it's too late for a run for the finals, their supporters might disagree, but I think that's the cold hard truth. North Melbourne by 60 points, they'll get the job done.
The next game is the Saturday twilight game between Collingwood and the GWS Giants at the MCG. For Collingwood, in comes Nathan Brown. Harry O'Brien returns after his stint on the sidelines. Jared Blair, and for his first game, in comes Brodie Grundy. Out goes Ben Hudson with a calf. Paul Seedsman with a calf as well, who's been very good this season. And omitted is Kayla Mooney, and Andrew Cracker has also been omitted.
And for the Giants, Tom Scully is a big inclusion, as is Adam Kennedy. Out comes Lockie Whitfield, who's been omitted, and Jared Ugle, who's also been omitted.
Oh, I don't like this one for the Giants. I don't like this one at all for the Giants. The Magpies will be fired up big time after their massive loss to the Gold Coast Suns last week. Probably the Magpies underestimated the Suns a little bit last week. And they won't make the same mistake twice, which spells Danger, danger for the GWS Giants.
Yeah, it's gonna be ugly out there at the MCG on Saturday. Collingwood, they weren't terrible last week, but they certainly weren't up to standard. Gold Coast really got the better of them, and unfortunately for the Giants, they're going to be on the wrong end of a good old magpie belting this week on a team that they've just given up their last chance at a run for the top four, and they'll be eager to make sure they get the home final in fifth position.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one positive, well, he certainly is a positive this season for the GWS Giants, and that's Jeremy Cameron. He'd be in my All Australian side at the moment. He's had such a good season. He's kicked 45 goals this year, and he's almost certainly going to kick 50 for this year. He's in his second year. He's sitting on my TV screen at the moment, and he's just such an impressive young footballer. And again, he had 9 shots on goal against Essendon last week, and he could have really been the difference if he had slotted a few more goals last week against the Bombers.
And it's really scary to think, John Patton with that ACL. I think he's done his ACL, is it?
That's correct. Yep.
And the prospect of bringing in Lance Franklin next season, having that strike force of those 3 amazing forwards, amazingly talented forwards, is just scary to think.
Absolutely, and throwing Adam Tomlinson there as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Spoke about him before.
Yeah, absolutely, and it probably leads on nicely to a question we got on the page this week from Daniel Dwyer. He says, "Hey guys, thought I'd send in a question for your podcast to be recording tonight. My question is, do the GWS Giants need Lance Franklin, or should they look at developing their current list?" What are your thoughts on that, Josh?
From a marketing perspective, I'd say yes. I think they do need Lance Franklin. They need the members. They need to be successful in the money-wise and membership-wise. Getting Franklin to the side is obviously going to bring some success as well. He's the type of player that can win you a game off his own boot and change the momentum of a game with one freakish goal or a tackle or something like that. But on the other hand, GWS do have the forwards that they can develop. We spoke about already, Cameron, Patton and Tomlinson. Those 3 players right there have the potential to be the best trio in the competition one day. And I know we might be going early in saying that. Tomlinson's had a good month. Patton's hardly got out in the field because he's been injured. And Cameron, as we know, has been super in his short career. But they've shown signs already that they can play together and be really effective as well. So some part of me says no. Some part of me says absolutely you need to get him. Nick, what about you?
I think you've summed it up perfectly there, Josh. From a getting bums on seats point of view, he's vital. That will, without a doubt, bring more members to their membership base and more fans to the game. From a playing perspective, he can turn a game, but he's probably unlikely to be in GWS's first premiership. So there's good things, there's bad things there, but as we've said all along, I still think they'll get him.
Yep.
Who are you tipping this week, Josh?
Collingwood by a comfortable 125 points. I just think,
Whew.
yeah, I just think they're gonna come out rip shreds and not take any SH1T from anyone. They're going to be so livid after what happened last week. They were basically embarrassed last week. They were the laughing stock of the competition. And they'll make sure that doesn't happen again. And they'll give the Giants a nice old touch-up, I think.
Ooh, nice percentage booster for the Pies, if you don't mind there. GWS's percentage is on a nice edge there at 50, which is pretty embarrassing down there. So for their sake, I hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, so I'm thinking Collingwood by a comfortable 80 points.
Our next game is a Fremantle versus the Adelaide Crows at Patterson Stadium on Saturday night. It's a big game for Fremantle. In comes big man Aaron Sandilands, Matthew Taberner and Nick Subin. Out goes Alex Silvani, Tom Sheridan and Jack Hanneth, who have all been omitted.
And for the mighty Adelaide Crows, who had a massive win over my Cats on the weekend, Sean McKernan and Kyle Hardigan come in, and Mitchell Grigg has been omitted, and Ben Rutten comes out with a shoulder injury.
Yeah, and David McKay plays his 100th game as well. He's been a terrific servant of the football club.
And also a mention for Kyle Hardigan, it's his first game, so good luck to him.
Yeah, he's a bulky defender, and he'll come in and play the role of Ben Rutten. Ideally, he'd be the guy that takes over Rutten's role when he eventually retires. Nick, I was a little disappointed in the Dockers last week. I was expecting their depth to probably stand up a bit more at the MCG against the Tigers. They were missing a host of names, a host of big names, just reeling a couple off, Pavlich, Sandilands and Ballantyne, McFarlane as well. They kind of disappointed me a little bit. They never really threatened the Tigers.
Well, I'm quite the opposite actually, Josh, because a lot of people, tip the Dockers with confidence against the Tigers, but I was quite the opposite. I tipped the Tigers with confidence. I thought all week that they were going to get up after initially, being 50-50, and feeling quite smug this week.
Yeah, absolutely, and I tipped the Tigers as well, pretty confidently. I just thought Pavlich and Ballantyne, they were two big losses in front of goals. They've done it without Sandilands most of the year. And obviously, I think the biggest loss was Luke McFarlane. He's such an underrated defender and takes Jack Rewott all the time and does normally a pretty good job on him. So I think he's probably their biggest loss. And it forced Zach Dawson to play on Jack Rewalt, who, as we all know, is much maligned, but can play that role, but was unfortunately beaten by Jack on the weekend.
And for the Crows, they really outplayed my Cats on the weekend. Really impressed with them. Certainly didn't expect it, and I don't think many people did.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think they were down by 40 points at one stage, so...
I'm not sure it was quite that much. I think 32, but giving credit to my boys.
Yeah, absolutely, and they were terrific in the way they fought back, especially in tough conditions where it was wet. And there's honestly no better wet weather side in the competition than the Cats. So it was a great win by the Crows, and they'll take some confidence out of that heading over to the magnificent stadium of Patterson Stadium. From memory, they did beat the Dockers over there last season, so it's not without a chance for the Crows to cause an upset in this match, especially with all those outs for the Dockers.
And it's certainly worth the mention that with that upset over the Cats, they're right back in that finals race. They're level on points with your Brisbanes, your Carltons, your West Coasts. So, they're not quite in the box seat to take Port Adelaide's spot, but they're in with a chance.
Absolutely.
Who are you tipping this week, Josh?
I can't go past Freo at home. I just think they might be too strong. They know their ground. They obviously know their ground very well. They set up defensively very well. I just think Fremantle might be a bit too strong. I think it'll be a low-scoring contest, especially with the way Fremantle play and the Adelaide's lack of probably forward potency. So I'm tipping Fremantle by about 22 points.
Well, if you had asked me 7 days ago, I probably would have tipped the Dockers by about 10 goals. But After Adelaide's performance last week, I think they'll really challenge Fremantle, but I still think the Dockers will get up in the end. Just too much on the line for Fremantle at the moment, and Fremantle by 30 points. Moving on, we have the Geelong Cats up against the St Kilda Football Club, 7:40pm at Skilled Stadium on Saturday night. In for the Cats comes Taylor Hunt, Steve Johnson comes back from suspension, Mitch Brown, who's been great in the VFL, Nathan Vardy likewise, and George Holland-Smith. And out comes Josh Hunt, the big muscly Josh Hunt with a shin injury, Jordan Murdoch omitted, Jimmy Bartell with that unfortunate suspension, Mark Blitzarves has been managed or arrested, however you like to say it, and Jesse Stringer with a knee injury.
Yeah, for the Saints, in comes Jaron Geary, who's been missed the last couple of weeks. He's a terrific young defender, and Aaron Sipos as well, I've been surprised at his treatment this season. I haven't seen him in the reserves, but I think he's a terrific young footballer, and he gets another crack at it. And out goes Trent Dennis-Lane and Reece Stanley, who have both been omitted. Nick, give us your take on this game, mate.
Well, I was very disappointed with the Cats' effort against Adelaide last week. They were completely outplayed, and we just should have won it. There's no two ways about it. And the Cats will know that, and they certainly won't sweep this one under the rug, to quote Chris Scott. Not going to hold anything back with this one, going to make a big call, and it's not something you see from the Cats very often, but I have no doubt they're going to destroy St Kilda this weekend at the Cattery.
Yeah, what was your take on Jimmy Bartell and Harry Taylor taking the option to kick around the body instead of taking the set shot?
Well, Steve Johnson put it on Twitter during the week, and I completely agree with him. From that distance, from that angle, coming around your body, it just opens up the angle, and there's more of the ball to kick. I guess in the slippery, windy conditions, any kick from that angle is hard, but I think those players, 9 times out of 10 or 19 times out of 20 even, they'd back themselves into that shot and they'd slot it through the middle. On this time, it was that 1 time out of 20 that they missed it, which is unfortunate. But hopefully, if the same situation arises comes finals time, they'll try that again, and that time they'll slot it.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to the Saints now, they had a terrific second half last week. Their first half wasn't so great against the Port Adelaide Football Club. Turned out to be a pretty good match in the end. Looking at the fixture, you probably thought Saturday night, which footy's on? You got St Kilda and Port Adelaide and Melbourne, Brisbane. Probably where the two teams are at the moment. You probably thought, okay, let's have a look at the cricket, and that wasn't much better. But the Saints, they were really impressive in the second half and gave us a glimpse of what's to come in the future. And I really liked what I saw, especially from the likes of Jack Stephen, Josh Saunders, Jack Nunes, Tom Simpkin, even throw Farron Ray in there as well, who's not young, but he's not old either, and he's really starting to show some signs of why St Kilda recruited him from the Doggies a few years ago. Obviously, it's going to be a tough test for the Saints to be able to keep this Geelong side limited, especially down at Simmons Stadium. It's going to be a very difficult game. I can't see the Saints really challenging the Cats at all. And I think this is going to head the way of a 10-goal drubbing. Nick, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, well, my tip obviously is going to be the Cats this week. It doesn't happen very often where the Cats absolutely put away a side. They very rarely, like you see Hawthorn do, where Hawthorn will just destroy one of the lesser sides. Geelong usually play a half of football and then they just go into cruise control for the rest of it, or the other way around. They'll let the lesser team into the game and then they'll destroy them in the second half. This week, I think it's going to be different. They were embarrassed last week by Adelaide, and it's time they really made a statement. And there's some young boys coming into the side this week, and it's their chance to really stand up and say, I want to be in this side come finals time. And I'm talking about the Mitch Browns, the George Holland-Smiths. Taylor Hunt's obviously cemented this spot, but he'll be a big inclusion. So I'm going to tip the Cats by 76 points this week. Haven't checked the weather, so it might be a bit wet, but hoping to see a massive win. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm leaning the same way, Nick, to be honest. I think the Cats will come out and have a big game. Unfortunate for the Saints, who are really struggling this year, but I have to agree, and I think the Cats will win about 66 points. Now we move on to the Sunday games, and this is a big game, this one. Port Adelaide versus the Brisbane Lions. Port Adelaide have brought in Nathan Bleed, Jack Homsch, Matt Thomas, Kane Corns, Dom Cassisi on an extended bench, and out goes Jake Neal, who's been rested, and Tom Jonas, who's been suspended for the next 3 weeks.
And for the Lions, Brett Maloney, Jonathan Brown, Mitch Golby, and Jack Crisp come in, and Pierce Hanley is a massive out with a hand injury.
Absolutely, and just a special mention to Matt Maguire playing his 150th game this week. Congratulations, he was terrific at the Saints. He's been under an injury cloud a lot at the Brisbane Lions, but he's still been very, very serviceable. Nick, this is a massive, massive game in terms of the season. If the Brisbane Lions win this game, all of a sudden they catapult themselves into real finals contention and with some momentum. Port Adelaide drop it. They're back in that group with the likes of Carlton, West Coast Adelaide, Gold Coast even, and the Brisbane Lions. So it's a massive game in terms of where the season sits. If Port Adelaide can win, they jump ahead. If Brisbane lose, you probably think their season's over. So it's a massive game for both sides.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Josh. Games don't get much bigger in the context of figuring out who's going to make the eight and who's going to settle down for go on holidays during finals time, I guess. There'll be a lot of teams hoping that Port Adelaide drop this game, and if they do, it's really anyone's race for eighth spot.
Absolutely, and I want to make special mention of Justin Westhoff. He was absolutely superb last week. He missed a week through suspension. Ken Hinkley wasn't too happy with his young forward, but he came back and took 3 game-saving marks, and he's taken his game to a next level this season. He's really developed into a consistent player, which he really struggled to do in his first half of his career. This season, he's been really good in bringing that consistency into his game.
Certainly has. Who are you tipping this week, Josh?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go Port Adelaide at home. It's too hard to pass them up, unfortunately. I think Brisbane Lions have improved under Michael Voss. Matthew Leuenberg has had a terrific season. He's come back from injury and really played a pivotal role for the Western Bulldogs there. For the Brisbane Lions, there's a few other players as well that have really improved. Brent Stakey's come back from injury as well. There's Jonathan Brown coming back into the side as well. Jed Ocock, who's having a terrific year. Jack Red and Daniel Rich have all been great as well. So, unfortunately for the Brisbane Lions, I'm going to have to tip Port Adelaide at home by 16 points.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there, Josh. Pierce Hanley, he's just the nail in the coffin for Brisbane as far as this game goes. They're still in with a chance, but I think Port Adelaide should and will get over the line. So I'm going to Port Adelaide by 25 points.
Our next game is the Western Bulldogs and the West Coast Eagles at Etihad Stadium on Sunday, 3:20 start. For the Bulldogs, in comes Tom Young, Jake Stringer, skipper Matthew Boyd is back after that fractured cheekbone, Christian Howard and Mark Austin. Out goes Brett Goods with an arm injury. Unfortunately, he's going to miss the rest of the season. And Nathan Rovat, who's out with soreness. And just a special mention to Tom Liberatore, who's having the season of a lifetime. He plays his 50th game, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's in All-Australian contention at the end of the year. He's been fantastic.
And for the Eagles, I've got my work cut out for me this week, Josh. Blaine Wilson, Ashton Hams, Brad Shepherd, Sam Butler, Scott Lysett, Fraser McGuinness, Scott Selwood and Matt Rosa come in. Matt Lacrosse with a foot injury comes out, Nick Natanui with soreness, Darren Glass with soreness, Luke Shuey with a hamstring injury, and Adam Selwood has been omitted surprisingly there. And Fraser McGuinness comes in for his first game.
Yeah, it's an interesting game, this one. With the outs that we spoke about with the West Coast Eagles, it does give the Western Bulldogs a sneaky chance. They've had the 2 top teams in the last 2 weeks have the Bulldogs in Essendon and Hawthorn, and been really competitive against both of them. Probably should have been a bit closer to Essendon. The final margin didn't do justice to the game, and they were really good against Hawthorn last week after being blown out of the water early. They managed to pull them back. So
it's kind of hard to see how games like this will pan out. With one team sort of just hanging on to a finals chance, and obviously wanting to get there, and another team, they're not going to make the finals this season, but they've been impressive in the last month or so, and it's obviously their home ground at Etihad, so they could give West Coast a run for their money.
absolutely, I have to agree with that, and There's some young players at the Western Bulldogs that are having some terrific years, and Jordan Ruffhead managed to shut his cousin Jared down last week, and he was really good, and he has been all season, and he's going to get probably Josh Kennedy this week, which will be a really tough test. Kennedy's on top of the Coleman medal at the moment with 51 goals, so this will probably be his biggest test. I wanted to make mention of Daniel Gian Siracusa as well. He's been fantastic this year. He's the old stalwart of the group and played as that sub for that period of time in the middle of the year. But he still leads the goal kicking at the club, and I just think it's a great credit to him that he's leading this young side each and every week and structuring up down forward. You got the young talent of Liam Jones, Jared Grant, Luke Dalhouse in that forward line. I just think he's been super and really underrated his season. He's been a terrific player over his career, but this year he's been really underrated in the work he does across the field.
Certainly has been, Josh. Who are you going for this week? Who are you tipping?
I can't go past the Eagles. I think the Eagles will win, but I would not be surprised if the Bulldogs cause an upset here. Uh, I think the West Coast midfield may be just a little bit too strong. Selwood, Maston, Matt Prittis, Andrew Gaff has to pull his finger out. He's had a very, very poor year. I'm surprised he hasn't been dropped. He's probably been lucky with the amount of injuries that he's had, the West Coast Eagles have had this season, to keep his spot. Brad Dalzell's had a very good month as well. I just think maybe their forward line and midfield might be a little bit too strong for the Bulldogs. Special mention to Mitch Brown as well. He re-signed yesterday for 3 years at the club. The Saints were after him heavily, and he's re-signed for a further 3 years. I'm tipping the West Coast Eagles by 21 points, but not with much confidence. Nick, who are you going for?
Well, I'm with you there as well. I'm tipping West Coast, but I give the Bulldogs a massive chance. I was very, very close to tipping the Bulldogs this evening. Um, I agree with you there. I'm gonna go West Coast, but 2 points I think will be the margin.
The final match this week is the Sydney Swans versus Richmond. Probably the second best game of the round, this one. It's going to be a cracker at the SCG, 4:40 on Sunday. In for Sydney comes Xavier Richards, Mitch Morton, and potentially for his first game, rookie Shane Biggs. Nick, you've got the Richmond Ins?
Certainly do. For the Tigers, Luke McGuinn comes in, Shane Tuck, David Asprey, and Sam Lonigan, and out comes Jake King with a hamstring injury.
Push up! Oh, it's going to be a cracking game, this one, I feel. The Richmond side is full of confidence at the moment. They finally got over a Ross Lyon coach side last week. They were very impressive as well. They didn't allow the Dockers any opportunities to get back into the game. They were very good defensively as well. Alex Ranson, Troy Chaplin, a match made in heaven. They are working fantastically together this season. I was really impressed with Dustin Martin last week, and especially this season as a whole. I've been one of his biggest critics, and I'll openly state that I have said that he is overrated. The only reason I say he's overrated is because people are saying some tremendous things about him, and are pumping his tyres up, but he hasn't brought that consistency in years past, and that's where I said he's the overrated part. He's a terrific footballer, don't get me wrong, and 2013 he has shown this terrific footballer that he can be because he's shown it on a consistent basis. And I'm happy to say now that Dustin Martin isn't overrated because he's starting to live up to that potential that he's shown. So he's been very, very good.
Yeah, he certainly has been, and the Sydney Swans are just steamrolling on, continuing their brilliant form, and they almost deserve to be, well, they certainly do deserve to be right in there as joint premiership favourites with Hawthorn and Geelong.
Absolutely, and the game against the West Coast Eagles last week was of pure class. They were challenged up until half time, but just kicked away. And we can talk all day about this side. The quality of the list is just first class. And Nick Malcheski's having a terrific year. He'll be in All-Australian contention at the end of the year. Ryan O'Keefe, Kieran Jack, Daniel Hanbury had his best game for the last month probably. He's had a lean couple of weeks. Even Jed Lamb stepped up last week. He kicked a couple of goals. Kurt Tippett kicked his usual 3 goals, 5. He just needs to turn that into 5 goals, 3, and the Swans will be an even better side. For Richmond, I think, where are they going to beat the Sydney Swans? It's going to have to be in the midfield. They've got that quality. Cochin had his best game for the season last week against the Dockers. Daniel Jackson's been very good this season. Matt White's been very good as well. Martin, Delidio, Foley have all been very good. So if they're going to win this game, it's got to be in that midfield, I feel.
And Josh, for the Tigers, there is a lid which is just waiting to be blown off. And is this the week it's going to happen?
If it is, it's going to be found on Mars, I'll tell you that much. Because if Richmond beat the Sydney Swans, then I think the Richmond fans will be just planning to have the first Monday off in September to make sure they get tickets to the first final. Because if Richmond beat the Sydney Swans, Richmond is a guaranteed finals spot.
They'll be lining up all the way down Punt Road and beyond.
Oh, absolutely. And as I said, that lid will be found on Mars and it will not be found again.
And having said that, is it going to happen this week?
Unfortunately, Tigs fans, I don't think so. I just think Sydney are going to be too strong. If the game was in Melbourne, I might have a different opinion. But the Sydney Swans just play that SCG so well and very rarely get beaten there. The Tigers do have a very good record against the Swans. But unfortunately, I don't think they can beat the Sydney Swans at the SCG. I'll be tipping the Swans by 32 points.
Yeah, I agree with you. Unfortunately for Tigers fans who aren't going to be happy with me, the lid's going to stay on for another week, and it's going to be Sydney by, actually to be a bigger margin this week. I'm going to say 46 points. I think they're going to give them a good old touch-up this week. So Sydney by 46 points.
Well, that's it for another show of Beyond the Boundary. It's been a ripping episode. Nick, I appreciate your input again. I hope to have you back next week.
Pleasure as always.
We'll have a special guest next week. She's well known around the Facebook community and her work for Supercoach. She's going to hopefully join us next week. It's going to be a massive round of footy. Friday night, Essendon versus Hawthorn at Etihad Stadium. You've got Sydney and Richmond at the SCG on Sunday night. It's going to be a ripping round of footy. I hope your team wins, except if you back for Hawthorn, because that means Essendon's won. But I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Go Bombers.
Josh has just let people know on Twitter that I tipped Sydney by 46 points, so hopefully I'm still around for next week's podcast. But let's see how we go. Go Cats.